Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith, and I'm dropping my phone on the floor again. Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith, and today I'm bringing you my top books of 2020. Yep, it's finally time. I've been wanting to film this since I think the start of December, but there was something in my heart that told me you cannot make this until it is actually 2021, because you never know. I might have read the best book in the world on the last day of the year, and I did, but it turned out to be more complicated than that. So I read over 280 books in 2020, and the idea of narrowing that down to a top 10 list is terrifying and also horrifying. But this year I was looking at the data. I was typing away at my computer and I realised that actually this year I have reread more books than I have ever read before, and I don't count rereads in a top 10 list. And I've also had fewer 5-star reads than in pretty much any other year. That doesn't mean that I've been reading worse books, just my bar for a 5-star read gets harder and harder to meet with every year as I have read more books. I look back at some of the things I rated 5 stars and I'm just like, no sir, no. I will do another instalment of all the books that I gave 5 stars to in 2020, the second half, to match up with the first half that I did, but I wanted to do this video first and kind of round out the year, because I read some good stuff. There's been some good stuff released. So these are 10 books that are my absolute favourites from this year that aren't rereads. There is some backlist in here. I think it is primarily new releases. I have also got an honourable mention section, which we will come to later, and I will explain that when we get to it. I don't know how much detail to go into with these as well, because all of them I have talked about in the past, but I thought that I would just go for it and we'll see how far we get. I have a coffee and I have time. So this is going from least favourite to most favourite, but they are all favourites. So book number 1 is Dragon Keeper by Robin Hobb. Now this is sort of being representative of all of the Robin Hobb I've read this year, which has been some of my favourite reading I have done. I'm doing it all via audiobook, it's great. But on top of that, Dragon Keeper has been my favourite of all of the Robin Hobb I've listened to. So if you don't know, this is a big epic fantasy series that spans multiple different trilogies and quartets, and there are dragons, there is magic, there is so much bleakness, there are people doing bad things, there are good people just trying to make it by. It's great. I could not recommend them highly enough. I think what I am feeling as I continue to read this series is it is so cleverly put together in how much you learn as you read. I think it must be how other people feel when they're discovering things about, is it the Cosmere or Cosmere? I'm not sure, but the Brandon Sanderson universe. That's how I feel with Robin Hobb, and I can totally see how it would have captured, or does capture, fandom even now, because there's stuff that you find out that makes sense in another book and makes sense of things in the past, and it's just really well planned out. And I'm enjoying that whole scenario greatly. So this is my favourite book that I have read of the whole series so far, or the whole series so far, but it is representing that I'm very much enjoying reading Robin Hobb. Next on my list is The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. This is a fantastic book. I already knew I loved N.K. Jemisin's writing, but this is probably my favourite book of hers that I've read to date, and it's interesting that it is sort of the least fantasy of all of them. It's still heavily rooted in fantasy. It's even got a couple of kind of horror elements to it, but it's set in New York. It's set in a real place, and I find that really interesting, that you really feel her love for the city come through in the story, which I really, really enjoy. This is great. Cities coming to life. New York has like 5 avatars, 1 for each of the boroughs. I don't think you need to know New York well to enjoy this book. You need to have a vague idea of New York, but you will learn about the city through this book, and it's great. I absolutely devoured it. I think that what really surprised me about this book is how much plot it had, because I thought it was going to be kind of a bit more wishy-washy. Oh, New York is great, let's talk about the issues. But actually the plot is really, really solid, and it does do all of that talking as well, but I don't know why I doubted that it would be wonderfully presented within this really great story, and I'm very excited for more books in that series. Yes. Next on my list is Raybearer. I very much enjoyed this. This is one of very few, I think, YA books that made it onto this list. It might even be the only one. I suppose Dragon Keeper's kind of YA. Anyway, Raybearer is amazing. If you want a YA that feels really fresh, but also has some familiar ideas and tropes within it, like finding yourself and standing up for yourself and found family, it's just wonderfully written. It feels like no other YA I've ever read before, It's so strong. The world building is fantastic. The story's fantastic. The characters are fantastic. My battery's going to die. But let me just close by saying, if Raybearer isn't already on your list of books to read, add it to it now because you will definitely enjoy it. Battery change. Did I knock my camera completely out of whack? Just a little bit. Raybearer, yes, definitely read it. This is another one that I think was a Space Sirens book club pick. And I don't know how, but they always pick the best books. This is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This is amazing. This is probably the first horror book that is definitely horror that I've ever read. And yes, it's Gothic horror. It's not like jump scary, but it is atmospherically amazing. It's so spooky. It's got such a good story to it. If you haven't already picked this up because you're not sure about it or you've not heard any of the hype somehow, absolutely read this. This is so phenomenal. So we have Noemi, who ends up going to this kind of creepy house out in the middle of nowhere to see if her cousin, who has recently got married and has been sending some odd letters, is okay. And things kind of get spookier and weirder from there. This is fantastic. Noemi is such a good character. The way that the plot plays out is really cleverly done in that it never feels like a sudden switch of genre. It just feels great and perfect. And as I say, this has atmosphere in spades, and that is most of what I care about in reading a book. Yes, read this thing, it's so good. Next up I have a novella, which is fun. I've read a lot of novellas this year. You'll see that coming up on this list. But this is Upright Women Wanted by Sarah Gailey. I have loved Sarah Gailey's writing this year. I think they write fantastic stuff that just speaks to stuff that I'm interested in. So this is set in the future American South, where everything has gone very patriarchal and bad, and our main character Esther, I believe is her name. I'm great at remembering names. Yes, she stows away with the librarians, who are women who travel town to town, delivering definitely the proper materials to people. And Esther kind of discovers that this is not what she expected. And again, a little bit of a theme in these. It's very much found family. Is it my favourite trope? Yes. This is just absolutely wonderful. It's really powerful. It's really triumphant. I do have a video filmed for this, but it's not coming out for quite some time. So be on the lookout for that in, I think, March. That's how full my video schedule has become. And if you're looking for a novella to read, I definitely recommend it. It's one of my favourite novellas of all time. Oh, so great. Would recommend. Next on my list is one that I actually have a video for. We're getting to that stage. Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty. This is the third book in the Daevabad trilogy, and it's fantastic and really rounding off the trilogy on such a high. I read it in a day, which was madness of me, but it is so good. If you haven't read the trilogy already, obviously don't start with book 3, but if you haven't read the trilogy already, I am so envious that you get to read it for the first time. This is just one of those series that grabs you by the heartstrings and drags you along through an adventure that just has everything in it. It's so fantastic. Absolutely go and read it. It's amazing. But the third book definitely deserved a spot on this list because it rounded things off so well. It did things I never thought it could have done with the plot. It went to places I didn't expect. It was nail-biting. It was heartbreaking. It was wonderful. And I think I've not heard anyone who's read it be really unhappy with the ending. I don't think. If you were unhappy with the ending, keep it to yourself. I don't want to know. I think it's a really strong ending to a trilogy that I'm excited to reread this year. You knew it was going to be on the list. You didn't know where. It is book number 7 we're up to of... It's 10-ish. This is The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart. I've talked about this 1,000,000,001 times this year. I feel like I don't need to talk about it again, but this is one of my favourite books of the year. It is not the favourite. It was beaten out by some very, very good books. This is fantastic. How do you explain this book? I have a whole video on this, but the core of the story, the Princess Lin has lost her memories in a terrible accident, and her father, the Emperor, is refusing to teach her the bone magic that she needs to know until she regains those memories. So the story is sort of her uncovering what's happened and what is happening, while also trying to master this bone shard magic, which is one of the coolest magic systems I have ever encountered, and you can find out all about it in the video. But what I love about this story is the world building feels great, each of the characters is interesting. Andrea Stewart just writes a really amazing book, and I'm so excited to read the next one when that comes out. I really hope it's soon. I really hope it's soon. I have talked about this book in every single video that I possibly could squeeze it into, so if you've stuck around this long, this will not come as a surprise. Yes, absolutely read this. Also, wonderful animal companion. Oh, so good. Continuing on with our boat theme, we have Call of the Bone Ships by R.J. Barker. This is the sequel to The Bone Ships, and this is wonderful as a sequel. I kind of it's the difficult thing of putting sequels on the list is really, I mean, that the duology up to this point is one of my favourite things that I've read this year. This is another one where found family again. But the story is fantastic, the character development is wonderful, the crew as a whole of this bone ship, oh, amazing. The story goes to places I never would have expected. If you think it's just going to carry on from the end of book one in a kind of linear fashion, it doesn't. It goes to some strange places, and it's just really well written, broke my heart into little pieces, made me cry, made me happy. I felt all of the emotions, atmosphere in spades. Amazing. Book number 9 was a recent addition to this list, and this was lent to me by the lovely Asha, and this is one of few books on this list that isn't a 2020 release. This is Bryony and Roses by T. Kingfisher. Asha was kind enough to lend me her copy, and I have not given it back yet because lockdown things. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and it is one of the best Beauty and the Beast retellings out there. If you are looking for one, this one, in this case, I've forgotten her name, Bryony, that makes sense, is a gardener, and that's kind of the angle they take on the story. And the way that it handles the curse and the romance, which is one of the hardest things to get right in Beauty and the Beast because of that Stockholm Syndrome kind of vibe to it. This book just handles it perfectly, and the atmosphere, again, how many times can I say atmosphere in one video? It's just fantastic, amazing, wonderful, and I could not recommend it more highly. It came very high on this list. I was sort of doing the thing of ranking a book against the next book to try and work out which one I liked most, and this came up pretty highly because I think it's just comforting, and if there's one thing we've really needed in 2020, it's been comforting reads. Okay, I'm going to do some honourable mentions before I tell you my favourite books of the year. Forgive me, it's 2 books, but anyway. So these are some things that I felt I wanted to factor on this list, but they were kind of small. Or I have one that was a reread, but I experienced the book anew. And then I have 2 that are 2021 releases, so I didn't want to count them as best books in the same way. I think they will count as best books of next year, but I don't know, and I wanted to mention them here, but I did read them in the last 3 days of the year. So the one that is very short is A Dead Gin in Cairo. This is a phenomenal short story / novella that is, I think it's probably a short story, it's only 40 pages or something, and it's a murder mystery that sets the scene of this wonderful alternate 1900s, early 1900s Cairo, where the jinn have been brought into the world in a more permanent way, and it turns Egypt into a global superpower, and it's a murder mystery set in that world. And it is phenomenal, it's fantastic. I listened to the audiobook, it blew my mind, 5 stars, amazing. But not very long, but also amazing. If this is the one video that people watch, then I want them to know they should read it. Another novella, this is my reread that felt completely different when I, in this case, listened to it again. And I think part of this is that the audiobook narrator is amazing. I mentioned Silver in the Wood, I think it was in a 5-star reads video last year, but I think I mixed it up with another book. But Silver in the Wood is an amazing LGBT novella, folklore-centred, forest-centred. Atmosphere in spades is amazing. I had read it in a previous year, but I read it anew at the end of this year and fell head over heels in love with it so much that I have bought myself a copy, and I just wanted to reiterate that people should read that because I feel like I didn't do it justice in previous wrap-ups and videos. It's so good. The first of my 2 2021 releases that I read right towards the end of the year that deserve a mention, Master of Gin. This is the first novella in the same world as Dead Gin in Cairo. This is utterly amazing. Please pre-order this. It's another wonderful mystery novel set in this alternate world. The world building is amazing, the character development is amazing, there's sapphic representation. It's so good. Read it. And last, I don't know if anyone will be surprised at this, but yesterday, on the last day of 2020, I read The Galaxy and the Ground Within by Becky Chambers, and it shot through all of my expectations. It's phenomenal. I will do a full video of it for February when it comes out, so that will be coming. I'm not going to dwell on it too much here, but if you haven't already pre-ordered this, you must do so. Those are my honourable mentions. On to the best book I read in 2020, and it is actually 2 books, because much like with The Bone Ships and The Call of the Bone Ships, I think these are best treated as a pair. And looking back on it, I'm pretty sure that I read the first book in January, so I think it does count. I don't own a copy of the second book, but I'm talking, of course, about City of Lies and Hollow Empire by Sam Hawke. These are my favourite books that I read this year. These encompass everything that I love about books. Everything I love in a fantasy novel was in these 2 books. I love the family elements, I love the atmosphere. They are mystery, fantasy mystery novels, which is everything I want. They are politics, but in a way that I could understand it. They are so good, and I want more people to read them. Hollow Empire, the sequel, came out this year, and I was nervous for it, I suppose, in a way. I wasn't sure if it could live up to how much I loved City of Lies, but it absolutely did. And as a pair, they make a fantastic duology. I really hope there are more books coming, at least more books from Sam Hawke. I would love more books in this series, but I will read Fantasy Mystery by Sam Hawke until the cows come home, because it's so phenomenally well written. I have a full review for this series, so I will not waffle at too much length because you can just go and watch that. But yes, I was thinking about it, and yeah, these have been the books that I've enjoyed most in 2020. Whew. I was going to do a worst/most disappointing books of 2020 video, or tack it onto the end of this, but there have been none. Not that I haven't read anything I didn't like, but more so, there was nothing that I thought back on it and went, ugh, no, I can remember reading that book and having a miserable time. Because most stuff that I didn't enjoy, I have either unhauled, so there is nothing here to remind me of it, I DNF'd it, or it wasn't so bad that I kind of want to talk about it again. My one thing that has bummed me out for this year is that To Sleep in a Sea of Stars won the Goodreads Choice Awards for sci-fi, because there is so much good sci-fi in the world. And there is also To Sleep in a Sea of Stars. I'm going to end that there. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that this has been interesting. If you've been watching for this whole year, thank you so much. I hope none of this came as a surprise, although what was missing from this list? What else did I love? What have I forgotten to talk about? Let me know. You can also let me know what your favourite books of the year have been. I would really love to hear them. They are some of my favourite thoughts to have. Thoughts to hear? Thoughts to have. You know what I mean. While you're down there commenting, you can follow me on all of my social media, linked below. You can subscribe because it makes me feel loved and appreciated. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one. There's gonna be some bloopers now. Better? Worse? Tolerable? Next on my favourite books of the year, this is another one that I think was a Space Sirens book club